Stand by the catering doors, Maeve. Your surgical scars are disgusting, and you are ruining the aesthetic of Pippa's rehearsal dinner, my mother, Althea, hissed. She adjusted her diamond necklace, a piece of jewelry paid for with the $135,000 she stole from my floor safe while I was in the hospital. 200 elite guests drank champagne around us. My sister, the bride, laughed loudly with her billionaire fiancé. You owe us this, my mother spat, shoving me toward the kitchen hallway. You ruined my life 15 years ago. Now stay in the shadows like a good girl. I looked at her. I smiled. Then, I picked up the microphone. But to understand how I federally executed my own family, we need to go back exactly 2 weeks. 2 weeks earlier, I sat in the back of a taxi heading to my downtown Seattle penthouse. I was exhausted. My abdomen burned with sharp, shooting pains. Every bump in the road sent a shockwave through my stitches. I had just returned from a specialized clinic in Colorado. I spent 5 days there recovering from a grueling, invasive surgery to excise stage 4 endometriosis. It was a brutal disease that ate away at my organs. I did not tell my family about the surgery. I told them I was on a business trip for my landscaping architecture firm. I knew exactly how my mother would react if she knew I was in a hospital bed. She would make it about herself. When the taxi pulled up to my building, I paid the driver and grabbed my small overnight bag, which suddenly felt like it weighed 100 pounds. Dragging my feet into the lobby, I took the elevator to the top floor. As the doors slid open, I limped down the quiet hallway, fumbled for my keys, and finally pushed the door open. I stopped in the entryway. Upbeat pop music was blasting from my smart speakers. The smell of expensive takeout filled the air. I heard laughter coming from my living room. I limped forward, leaning heavily on the wall. I turned the corner into the living area. My mother, Althea, was sitting on my expensive Italian leather sofa. She held a glass of my vintage red wine. My father, Holden, was standing near the kitchen island, eating sushi from a plastic tray. My younger sister, Pippa, was standing in the center of the room. She was wearing a custom-made bridal veil. She twirled around, laughing. "It looks perfect on you, sweetie," my mother said. She took a sip of the wine. None of them noticed me standing there. I looked past them. I looked toward my home office area. The heavy oak desk was pushed out of place. The expensive Persian rug was rolled back. The floorboards were exposed. The hidden floor safe was cracked wide open. The heavy steel door rested on its hinges. I dropped my overnight bag. It hit the hardwood floor with a loud thud. The music kept playing, but the laughter stopped. Pippa froze. Holden dropped a piece of sushi on the counter. Althea turned her head slowly. She looked at me. She did not look guilty. She looked annoyed. "Turn the music off," I said. My voice was raspy from the breathing tube they used during my surgery. Holden reached over and tapped the smart speaker. The room went dead silent. "What are you doing here?" Althea demanded. She set the wine glass down. "You said your business trip lasted until Sunday. It is only Thursday." I walked slowly into the room. I ignored her question. I pointed a trembling finger at the open floor safe. "Where is it?" I asked. Holden looked down at his shoes. He cleared his throat. "Now, Maeve, let us just calm down and have a rational discussion." "Where is it?" I repeated, my voice rising. Inside that safe was a collection of antique gold coins and a rare platinum Patek Philippe pocket watch. My grandfather gave them to me right before he died. He bypassed my parents entirely. He explicitly handed me the velvet boxes and the combinations. He knew my father had a gambling problem. He knew my mother was obsessed with status. The collection was recently appraised at $135,000. It was my emergency fund. It was my safety net. Althea picked up her designer Hermes handbag from the coffee table. The bag looked unusually bulky. The top zipper was open. I saw the corner of a familiar dark blue velvet box poking out from the inside. "Give that back right now," I said. I took a step forward. A sharp spike of pain shot through my stomach. I gasped and grabbed the edge of the kitchen counter to steady myself. Althea stood up. She clutched the bag tightly to her chest. She glared at me. She did not apologize. She went on the offensive. "You lied to us," Althea said. She pointed at my stomach. She pointed at the medical discharge papers sticking out of my open overnight bag. "You were not on a business trip. You were in a hospital. You went to a clinic in Colorado. I saw the luggage tags. What did you do? I had surgery, I said. I breathed heavily. I had stage 4 endometriosis. They had to remove tissue. They had to cut into my organs. Now, put the bag down. Pippa scoffed. She took off the veil and tossed it on a chair. So, you were just being dramatic again? You always have to ruin my mood. I am getting married in less than 2 weeks, Maeve. I do not need your negative medical energy in my life right now. I stared at my sister. I could not believe her words. I just had major surgery, Pippa. You broke into my house. We did not break in, Holden argued. He stepped out from behind the counter. You gave us the emergency spare key 3 years ago, and you left the master code for the safe in your desk drawer. We were just reallocating family resources. Reallocating? I asked. I felt sick. That is grand larceny. That is theft. Althea walked right up to me. She smelled like cheap perfume and my expensive wine. She looked me up and down with pure disgust. You are so selfish, Maeve, Althea spat. You have always been selfish. Pippa is marrying Preston Kensington. The Kensingtons are a billionaire real estate family. Do you know what kind of pressure that puts on us? We have to host a rehearsal dinner for 200 elite guests. We have to buy a wedding gift that matches their status. So you stole my inheritance? I yelled. It is not your inheritance, Althea screamed back. It is family money, and we need liquid cash right now. You just said it yourself. You had endometriosis surgery. You had organs cut out. You are a workaholic spinster. You are barren now, Maeve. You cannot even give me a grandchild. You have no future. Pippa is giving me a legacy. She needs this money more than your broken, barren body does. The words hit me like a physical punch to the face. Barren, broken, spinster. She used my most traumatic, painful medical battle as a weapon to justify a felony. She looked at my physical suffering and saw an excuse to rob me. Holden nodded in agreement. Your mother is right, Maeve. You live in a nice penthouse. You have a successful landscaping business. You do not need antique gold sitting in a dark hole in the floor. Pippa needs a brand new car for her wedding. We are cashing the gold in today. I looked at Pippa. She was admiring her engagement ring in the reflection of my window. She did not even look guilty. She looked bored. Give me the bag, Mom, I said. I tried to sound intimidating, but my voice shook. My body was failing me. The pain medication was wearing off. Althea laughed. It was a cold, cruel sound. Or what? You will call the police? On your own parents? 2 weeks before your sister's high society wedding? You will ruin our reputation? Go ahead. Pick up the phone. Call them. She stepped closer, her face inches from mine. You owe us this money, Maeve. You know exactly why you owe us. You owe me my life. You owe me my career. This $135,000 is just a down payment on your debt. I froze. My hand hovered over my cell phone in my pocket. I did not pull it out. I did not dial 911. Althea knew exactly which button to push. She knew exactly how to paralyze me. She played the one card that had controlled my entire adult life. Why didn't I call the police right then and there? Why did I stand in my own living room, bleeding through my surgical bandages, letting my family walk out the door with my grandfather's gold? Because of the guilt, the crushing, suffocating guilt I carried for 15 years. When I was 17 years old, my mother owned a high-end, luxury bridal design studio. It was her entire world. She just signed a massive contract to design dresses for a local politician's daughters. The contract was worth over $100,000. It was going to pull our family out of middle-class mediocrity and launch my mother into the elite social circles she always craved. One evening, I was working the closing shift at the studio. I swept the floors. I locked the front doors. I checked the back rooms. Then, I went home. The next morning, the phone rang at 6 a.m. It was the building manager. The studio was completely flooded. The water ran overnight from a clogged sink in the upstairs dining room. It collapsed the ceiling. It destroyed every single custom silk gown in the shop. The inventory was ruined. The politician canceled the contract and sued my parents for breach of agreement and damages. The lawsuit bankrupted my family. My father lost his business credit. My mother lost her studio, her reputation, and her mind. Althea blamed me. She screamed at me for hours in the living room. She threw plates at the wall. You left the water running. You did not check the sink. You destroyed our future, she shrieked. I did not remember leaving the water on. I distinctly remembered checking the upstairs room and turning the lights off. But Althea was so relentless, so completely certain of my guilt, that I began to doubt my own memory. She gaslit me into believing I was a careless, stupid, destructive monster. From that day on, I was the family scapegoat. I was the debt holder. While Pippa got to go to expensive private schools and take European vacations, I started working 3 jobs. I skipped college parties. I built my landscaping architecture firm from the ground up, working 80-hour weeks in the dirt and the mud. And every time I made a profit, I gave it to my parents. Over the last 10 years, I paid $40,000 directly to my father's creditors. I paid their mortgage when they fell behind. I bought my mother designer bags to try and buy her forgiveness, but it was never enough. Althea made sure I woke up every single day remembering that I was the reason she was not rich and famous. Standing in my penthouse, looking at Althea holding the stolen gold, that 15-year-old guilt crushed my chest. She framed the theft as a debt collection. She made me feel like I had no right to the gold anyway, because I took away her bridal studio. I looked at Holden. I looked at Pippa. They stared back at me with cold, entitled eyes. They did not see a daughter or a sister recovering from surgery. They saw an ATM. They saw a punching bag. My legs gave out. I sank down onto a kitchen stool. I wrapped my arms around my stomach. Althea smiled. She knew she won. She knew the psychological prison she built for me was still holding strong. That is what I thought, Althea said. She adjusted her jacket. We are leaving now. I have a caterer to meet. Do not call us. Clean up this mess. And remember, you are a bridesmaid. Act like one. They walked out of my apartment. Pippa slammed the front door behind them. I sat alone in the silence. The smart speaker was still off. The floor safe was still open. The apartment felt cold. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking violently. My surgical wounds throbbed with a sharp, burning agony. I did not scream. I did not throw anything. I picked up my cell phone. I did not call the police. I opened a travel application. I booked a room at a high-end hotel downtown. I dragged my suitcase into my bedroom. I packed 5 changes of clothes. I packed my laptop. I packed my medical binders and my painkillers. I walked back into the living room. I looked at the empty safe one last time. I walked out of the penthouse and locked the door behind me. I took an Uber to the hotel. I checked in, went up to my room, crawled into the pristine white bed, and finally allowed myself to cry. I cried for my stolen inheritance. I cried for my barren body. I cried for the 15 years of my life I wasted trying to please a mother who hated me. Did I make a mistake by not calling the police right then? Should children be forced to pay for the financial ruins of their parents? Tell me what you think in the comments below, because what happened the next morning changed my entire strategy. I woke up in the hotel room. The digital clock on the bedside table read 2 p.m. I had slept for nearly 18 hours. The heavy blackout curtains blocked the Seattle sunlight. My abdomen felt like it was filled with broken glass. I reached for the glass of water on the nightstand. My hand trembled. I swallowed 2 heavy painkillers. I lay back against the pillows and stared at the ceiling. I was completely alone. My family was currently spending my inheritance. The psychological conditioning ran deep. For 15 years, Althea trained me to believe I was a financial burden. She trained me to believe I ruined her life by flooding that bridal studio. Even now, lying in a hotel bed recovering from the surgical removal of my organs, a dark, toxic voice in the back of my head whispered that maybe she was right. Maybe I did owe them the $135,000. Maybe that stolen gold was the final price I had to pay to buy my freedom from their abuse. I picked up my phone. I stared at the blank screen. I had 1 minute of intense, agonizing hesitation. I thought about packing my bags, leaving Seattle, and never looking back. I thought about letting them keep the gold. I thought about letting Pippa have her perfect high society wedding. I just wanted the pain to stop. I just wanted to be free. Then the phone vibrated. The screen lit up. It was a text message from Pippa. She attached a high-definition photograph. I opened the message. The picture showed Pippa standing in the driveway of our parents' estate. She was wearing designer sunglasses and a tight white dress. She was leaning against the hood of a brand new, pristine, white Tesla Model X. The car had temporary dealer plates. She held the electronic key fob up to the camera, smiling a wide, victorious smile. Below the picture was a block of text. Thanks for the wedding gift, sis. The white pearl paint took an extra day to detail, but it is gorgeous. P.S. Mom said since you had that surgery and you are completely barren now, you will not mind that Dad went ahead and cleared out Grandpa's $50,000 educational bond too. You are never going to have kids to use it anyway, and I desperately needed the extra cash to upgrade the imported floral arrangements for the rehearsal dinner. See you next Friday. Wear something that covers your scars. XO. I stopped breathing. I read the text message again. Then I read it a third time. The $50,000 educational bond. When my grandfather died, he did not just leave me the gold and the pocket watch. He set up a specific, locked educational bond. It was strictly earmarked for my future children. It was a trust meant to ensure the next generation had a foundation. Holden and Althea knew about it. They hated it. They hated that my grandfather bypassed them to protect my future. They did not just steal my emergency fund. They robbed the ghost of my unborn children. They weaponized my medical trauma. They used the surgical removal of my diseased organs as a legal justification to drain a trust fund, just so Pippa could buy imported white roses to impress a billionaire's son. The hesitation vanished. The 15 years of crushing, suffocating guilt evaporated from my chest in a single heartbeat. It was never about the flooded bridal studio. It was never about a debt. It was about pure, unadulterated greed. They were a black hole. If I gave them $1 million, they would complain that I did not give them two. I was not their daughter. I was a resource. The scapegoat died in that hotel bed. The executioner woke up. I sat up. The pain in my abdomen ripped through my nerves, but I ignored it. I threw the heavy hotel blankets off my legs. I stood up on the carpet. I walked into the bathroom. I turned on the cold water. I splashed it on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. My skin was pale. My eyes were sunken. But my expression was entirely different. There was no fear left. There was no guilt left. There was only cold, calculated rage. I walked back into the bedroom. I opened my laptop. I accessed my hidden security camera cloud storage. Before I left my apartment, I had checked the footage from the teddy bear camera hidden in my home office. Now, I needed to look at it closer. I pulled up the video of Holden and Althea breaking into the floor safe. I watched them punch the code. I watched my mother stuff the velvet boxes into her Hermes bag. But I paused the video right at the 24-second mark. I zoomed in on my father's left hand. Holden was holding a manila folder. It had a thick red federal notary stamp on the front page. He did not bring that folder to carry the gold. He brought it to verify something. I closed the laptop. I picked up my phone. I dialed a number I had not called since my grandfather's funeral. The line rang twice. Silas and Associates. How may I direct your call? A receptionist answered. I need to speak to Silas, I said. My voice was flat. Tell him it is Maeve. Tell him Holden just cracked the floor safe. There was a brief pause. Then the line clicked. A deep, gravelly voice came on the speaker. Maeve, Silas said. He did not ask how I was doing. He was a ruthless estate attorney. He operated on facts. Are you looking at an empty safe? Yes, I said. They took the gold. They took the Patek Philippe watch. And Pippa just texted me. She said Holden also liquidated the $50,000 educational bond. Silence hung on the line for 5 seconds. How fast can you get to my office? Silas asked. I will be there in 20 minutes, I replied. I took a black car to the financial district. Silas's office was located on the 42nd floor of a sleek glass skyscraper. The lobby smelled like polished marble and old money. I walked through the double glass doors. The receptionist did not ask me to sit. She immediately escorted me down the long hallway into a massive corner office overlooking the Seattle skyline. Silas was sitting behind a heavy mahogany desk. He was a man in his late 60s, wearing an immaculate charcoal suit. He had sharp, predatory eyes. He was my grandfather's closest friend and his primary legal attack dog. Silas hated my parents. He knew exactly what kind of financial parasites they were. I sat down in the leather chair opposite his desk. I pulled my laptop out of my bag. I opened it, loaded the hidden camera footage, and turned the screen toward him. They broke in on Tuesday morning, I said. I was in a surgical ward in Colorado. They used the emergency key. They used my master code. Look at the folder in his hand. Silas put on his wire-rimmed reading glasses. He leaned forward. He watched the footage in complete silence. He watched Althea stuff the velvet boxes into her bag. He watched Holden examine the manila folder with the red notary stamp. Silas hit pause. He leaned back in his leather chair. He took his glasses off. A slow, chilling smile spread across his face. "Your father is an absolute moron," Silas said quietly. "He sold it," I said. "Pippa just sent me a picture of a brand new Tesla Model X. They bought it in cash. They used the gold to buy a car for her wedding. Can we track the pawn shop? Can we get the gold back?" Silas laughed. It was a harsh, scraping sound. "Maeve, you do not sell a flawless, serialized Patek Philippe Platinum pocket watch and a certified antique gold collection to a pawn shop. That is not how high-end assets work. That collection is valued at $135,000. No pawnbroker in this state has that kind of liquid cash sitting in a register. He had to take it to a specialized, licensed estate broker. And estate brokers require documentation." I frowned. "What documentation?" "He stole it from my safe. It was mine." Silas shook his head. He opened a locked drawer in his desk. He pulled out a thick black leather binder. He flipped it open. He slid a piece of heavy parchment paper across the desk toward me. "Read the header," Silas commanded. I looked down at the paper. It was a copy of my grandfather's original estate transfer, but it did not say personal gift. It read, "Federally Registered Heritage Trust, Escrow, Beneficiary, Maeve." I stared at the words. "Federally registered? What does that mean?" "It means your grandfather was a genius," Silas explained, resting his elbows on the desk. "He knew you were surrounded by vultures. He knew Holden was drowning in commercial debt. He knew Althea would eventually try to strip you of your assets to fund her ridiculous lifestyle. So, he did not just hand you a box of gold. He registered that specific collection as the physical collateral of a protected federal trust." Silas tapped his pen against the mahogany wood. "You are the sole beneficiary, but you do not legally own the gold as a private citizen. The trust owns the gold. The federal government recognizes it as a protected corporate asset. It is heavily monitored." I looked up at him, my heart pounding against my ribs. "Holden sold it on Tuesday. Pippa has the car today. How did he sell a federal asset?" "That is exactly the point," Silas said. His eyes gleamed with legal bloodlust. "In order for a licensed broker to purchase that gold and that watch, the seller must provide a signed, notarized federal interstate wire transfer authorization. The signature must match the registered beneficiary, you." The air in the office went still. The pieces clicked together in my mind. "The manila folder," I whispered. "The one in the video with the red notary stamp." "Exactly," Silas said. "Holden could not just walk in and hand them the gold. He had to prove he had the legal right to liquidate the trust. Since you were unconscious in a hospital bed in Colorado, Holden did the only thing a desperate, greedy man could do. He forged your signature on a federal banking document. He fabricated a power of attorney. He committed identity theft to bypass the trust security." I felt a rush of adrenaline mask the pain in my stomach. "So this is not just theft. This is fraud." "Maeve, this is not a local police matter," Silas corrected me, leaning closer. "By forging your signature to liquidate a federally registered trust, your father committed federal wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and grand larceny. And because he used those stolen funds to purchase a luxury vehicle across state lines, he committed money laundering. This is FBI jurisdiction." The moment that broker ran the serial number on the Patek Philippe and deposited the forged transfer document into the banking network, the automated federal system flagged it. Silas pulled out a second piece of paper. It was a digital printout with a red banking logo. "I got the alert from the escrow monitoring system this morning. The funds were cleared, but the signature mismatch triggered a manual review. The feds are already building a file." I sat back in my chair. My parents did not just rob me. They accidentally walked directly into a federal trap my grandfather set for them years ago. "What about the $50,000 educational bond?" I asked. "Same mechanism," Silas said in disgust. "Holden used the exact same forged power of attorney to breach the educational trust. He liquidated 85% of it to pay a luxury catering company and a high-end florist for Pippa's rehearsal dinner." Silas closed the black binder with a loud snap. "I can make one phone call right now. I can have the FBI freeze every single bank account attached to your father's name by 5 p.m. today." I can have federal agents kick down the door of his estate tomorrow morning and drag him out in handcuffs. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was Thursday. Pippa's wedding was a week from Saturday. The rehearsal dinner, a massive 200-person event at the City Botanical Gardens, was scheduled for next Friday night. Althea wanted to show off. She wanted to prove to the billionaire Kensington family that she belonged in their world. She funded her entire illusion with my stolen blood. I did not want them arrested quietly in the morning. I wanted them destroyed. I wanted every single elite guest, every single politician, and every single billionaire in that room to watch the facade shatter into a million pieces. I looked Silas dead in the eye. "Draft the injunctions," I said. My voice was steady and ice-cold. "Prepare the asset freeze, but do not submit the arrest warrants today." Silas raised an eyebrow. "You want to wait? They are spending your money, Maeve." "Let them spend it," I replied. "Let them buy the flowers. Let them rent the venue. Let them put on their expensive suits and stand in front of the Kensingtons. Hold the federal warrants until exactly 4:55 p.m. next Friday. Let the banking systems lock them out right as the rehearsal dinner begins. I want to execute them in public." Silas's predatory smile returned. He picked up his pen. "I will have the documents ready." Friday evening arrived with a chilling autumn wind. The Seattle Botanical Gardens was a sprawling 3-acre glass dome filled with exotic flora and imported orchids. Ironically, it was a venue my landscaping architecture firm was hired to design 2 years ago. I knew every pathway, every lighting rig, and every sightline in the building. Althea chose it because it was the most expensive, exclusive venue in the city. She had no idea she was stepping onto my battlefield. I arrived at 7 p.m. I did not wear the cheap, muted bridesmaid dress Althea demanded I wear to blend into the background. I wore a tailored, floor-length emerald green silk gown. It was striking. It was commanding. The neckline dipped low enough to show the top edge of my surgical scar. I did not cover it up with makeup. I wore it like a medal. I handed my keys to the valet. I walked up the marble steps. My abdomen still ached, but the painkillers and the sheer adrenaline kept my posture perfectly straight. I pushed open the heavy glass doors. The venue was saturated in grotesque excess. 200 elite guests milled around the indoor waterfall. Waiters in white gloves carried silver trays of caviar and vintage champagne. A classical string quartet played softly in the corner. Thousands of imported white roses cascaded from the ceiling. Every single petal was paid for with the stolen future of my unborn children. I spotted my family immediately. They were holding court near the center of the room. Pippa wore a custom silk rehearsal gown that cost more than my first car. She was laughing loudly, clinging to the arm of Preston Kensington, her billionaire fiancé. Preston looked bored, checking his phone while Pippa talked. Holden wore a bespoke tuxedo. He was shaking hands with a city councilman, projecting the image of a titan of industry. He looked like a man without a single care in the world. He had absolutely no idea that exactly 30 minutes ago, at 4:55 p.m., the federal banking clearinghouses automatically locked every single checking, savings, and credit account attached to his social security number. He was currently standing in a room full of millionaires, and he was completely destitute. Althea saw me first. She detached herself from a group of wealthy socialites. She marched across the marble floor. She wore a heavy diamond necklace that glittered aggressively in the ambient lighting. She stopped 2 feet away from me. Her smile remained frozen on her face for the benefit of the guests, but her eyes were entirely black with rage. "What are you wearing?" Althea hissed. Her voice was a venomous whisper. "I told you to wear the beige dress. I told you to cover that disgusting scar. You are ruining the aesthetic of the photographs." The beige dress did not fit over my bandages. I lied smoothly. Althea grabbed my upper arm. Her acrylic nails dug into my skin. "Listen to me very carefully, Maeve. Richard Kensington is sitting at the front table. He is evaluating us. I will not let your pathetic jealousy ruin your sister's future. You will go stand by the catering doors. You will smile. You will play the obedient Baron's sister. If you embarrass me tonight, I will make sure you lose your business lease next month. Do you understand me?" I looked down at her hand gripping my arm. I looked back up into her eyes. "I understand perfectly, Mom," I said softly. Althea released my arm. She smoothed the front of her expensive dress. She gave me one last look of absolute contempt before turning around and walking back to the billionaire's table. I did not go to the catering doors. I walked directly to the front of the room, taking a seat at the edge of the reserved family tables. I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. I took a sip. I waited for the show to begin. At 8 p.m., a waiter chimed a crystal glass. The string quartet stopped playing. The low murmur of 200 conversations faded into silence. Holden stepped up onto the raised acrylic stage at the front of the botanical garden. He adjusted the microphone stand. He tapped it twice. The sound echoed through the glass dome. He smiled warmly at the crowd. He was in his element. He was pretending to be a king. "Friends, family, esteemed guests," Holden began, his voice dripping with practiced charisma. "Thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate the union of two wonderful families. When I started my business 30 years ago, I had nothing but a dream and the unwavering support of my beautiful wife, Althea." He paused for polite applause. Althea beamed from her seat. "Building an empire requires sacrifice," Holden continued, spinning a flawless, disgusting narrative. "It requires dedication. It requires family loyalty. We have always taught our daughters that family comes first. Pippa, you look beautiful tonight. Preston, welcome to the family." Holden raised his glass toward the Kensington table. Richard Kensington, the patriarch, offered a curt, unenthusiastic nod. "And speaking of family," Holden said, scanning the room. He spotted me sitting near the edge. He extended his arm toward me. "I want to publicly thank my oldest daughter, Maeve. Maeve recently underwent a minor medical procedure, but she powered through it to be here tonight. And more importantly, she provided a generous, substantial financial wedding gift to help her sister start her new life. Come up here, Maeve. Let everyone give you a hand." The crowd applauded politely. Holden thought he was trapping me. He thought calling me out in public would force me to play along and validate his theft. He wanted to cement the narrative that I willingly handed over the $135,000. I set my champagne glass down. I stood up. I walked slowly up the steps to the acrylic stage. I stood next to my father. He put a heavy hand on my shoulder, his fingers gripping my collarbone tightly, a silent warning to behave. Holden held the microphone out to me. "Say a few words, sweetheart." I took the microphone. The cold metal felt heavy in my hand. I looked out over the sea of faces. I saw politicians. I saw bankers. I saw Pippa grinning smugly. I saw Althea watching me with narrowed, threatening eyes. And in the very back of the room, standing near the audiovisual booth, I saw Silas. He was holding a small black remote control. I brought the microphone to my mouth. I did not tremble. I did not waver. "My father speaks of sacrifice," I said. My voice was amplified, echoing sharply off the glass ceiling. "He speaks of family loyalty. But I think it is important to clarify exactly what that sacrifice looks like." Holden's grip on my shoulder tightened. He let out a nervous chuckle. "Okay, Maeve, keep it short." I stepped away from his hand. I kept the microphone close. 2 weeks ago, I was lying in a surgical unit in Colorado, having diseased organs excised from my body. While I was unconscious and bleeding, my father and my mother used an emergency key to enter my home. They bypassed my security. They cracked open my floor safe. The polite smiles in the audience vanished. A sudden, chilling wave of confusion swept through the 200 guests. "Maeve, stop talking," Holden hissed under his breath. He reached for the microphone. I pivoted away from him. I raised my voice, commanding the room. They did not ask for a wedding contribution. They stole a $135,000 antique gold and platinum collection left to me by my grandfather. And when I confronted them, my mother told me that because my surgery left me barren and unable to have children, I did not deserve the money. A collective gasp rippled through the front tables. Several women covered their mouths in horror. Althea jumped out of her chair. "She is lying," Althea shrieked, her voice echoing wildly. "She is on heavy narcotics. She is hallucinating. Turn off her microphone." "I am not hallucinating," I said calmly. I looked over the crowd and nodded directly at Silas in the back of the room. "And I brought the receipts." Silas pressed the button on the remote control. The two massive projection screens flanked on either side of the stage, originally intended to play a romantic slideshow of Pippa and Preston, violently dropped down from the ceiling. The projectors flared to life. The screen on the left illuminated the room with a bright, high-definition scan of a legal document. The red federal notary stamp was visible in the corner. The gold my father stole was not private property, I announced over the microphone, my voice echoing like a judge reading a verdict. It was the physical collateral of a federally registered heritage trust. In order to liquidate it and buy my sister's white Tesla, my father had to forge my signature on an interstate wire transfer. I pointed to the left screen. That is the forged federal document. I pointed to the right screen. And that is the verified liquidation receipt from the estate broker, time-stamped exactly 3 hours after my parents broke into my safe. My father did not build an empire. He committed federal wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and money laundering. The ballroom descended into absolute, paralyzing chaos. The classical musicians packed their instruments and fled toward the catering doors. Elite socialites backed away from the family tables as if Althea and Holden were contagious. "Turn it off," Holden bellowed. He lunged at the screen, blindly clawing at the thick canvas fabric as if he could physically rip the digital evidence away. He looked entirely deranged. Althea sprinted toward the stage. She tripped on the hem of her designer gown, falling hard onto her knees. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "You vicious little bitch! You are ruining everything! Arrest her! Somebody arrest her for slander!" "It is not slander if it is a federal indictment, Althea," a booming voice cut through the screaming. The room went dead silent again. Everyone turned toward the front table. Richard Kensington, the billionaire patriarch, slowly stood up. He buttoned his suit jacket. He did not look shocked. He did not look appalled by the crime. He looked incredibly, profoundly annoyed. Holden scrambled off the stage. He rushed toward Richard, his hands raised in a desperate pleading gesture. "Richard, please, listen to me. This is a misunderstanding. She is a bitter, sick girl. I have the assets. I have the real estate portfolio. Our merger is still secure. Do not let family drama ruin our business arrangement." I watched from the stage, waiting for Richard to defend his future daughter-in-law. I expected the billionaire to call his lawyers to protect the wedding. Instead, Richard Kensington delivered a twist that completely shattered my father's reality. Richard looked at Holden with absolute disgust. He picked up his crystal champagne glass, took a sip, and set it down. "There is no merger, Holden," Richard said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the silent room, and there never was. Holden froze. The color drained from his face. "What? The wedding? The contracts?" "I do not care about the wedding," Richard stated coldly. He looked around the room, unafraid of the audience. "My financial analysts audited your commercial brokerage firm 6 months ago. We know you are drowning in $2 million of high-interest debt. You are a sinking ship. The only reason I allowed Preston to propose to your vain, empty-headed daughter was to secure a post-nuptial leverage contract. I was going to use the marriage to absorb your remaining prime real estate lots for pennies on the dollar to cover your impending defaults." Althea let out a strangled, breathless cry. The illusion she dedicated her life to building was evaporating in real time. Richard stepped closer to Holden. He looked down at him like a pest. "I thought you were just a desperate, incompetent businessman trying to stay afloat. I did not know you were stupid enough to commit federal wire fraud against a registered trust. A felon's assets are immediately seized and frozen by the federal government during an investigation. You have zero leverage. You have zero assets. You are completely worthless to me." Richard turned to his son. Preston was already standing up. Preston did not look heartbroken. He looked like a junior executive walking away from a bad deal. Preston walked over to Pippa. Pippa was hyperventilating, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. She reached out for him. "Preston, please. We love each other. Do not listen to them." Preston grabbed her left hand. He did not hold it affectionately. He gripped her fingers, slid the $80,000 diamond engagement ring off her hand, and dropped it into his suit pocket. "The contract is void," Preston said flatly. He turned his back on her and followed his father toward the exit. The entire Kensington family, their bodyguards, and their elite associates walked out of the botanical gardens without looking back. Pippa collapsed onto the marble floor, screaming in pure, unadulterated agony as she watched her billionaire lifestyle walk out the door. Althea was sobbing hysterically, surrounded by abandoned tables and imported white roses. Holden was on his knees, staring blankly at the massive projector screens displaying his felony. I stood in the center of the stage. The emerald green gown hung perfectly on my frame. My surgical scars throbbed, but I felt absolutely nothing but cold, clinical satisfaction. Standing there, watching my mother hyperventilate on the marble floor and my sister weeping over a lost diamond, I knew I had the power to stop the FBI from raiding their house the next morning. If you were in my shoes, looking at the family who mocked your illness, stole your future, and gaslit you for 15 years, would you have called Silas to cancel the federal warrants? Drop a comment below, because my next move changed our family forever, and the final secret they were hiding was far worse than the stolen gold. I did not call Silas to cancel the federal warrants. I left the botanical gardens. I went back to my hotel room. I ordered room service. I ate a hot meal. I took my pain medication. I went to sleep. I slept deeply and peacefully for the first time in 15 years. 6 hours later, the sun had not yet risen over the Seattle skyline. It was 5:45 a.m. on Saturday morning. This was the exact day Pippa was supposed to walk down the aisle in a custom designer gown. She was supposed to marry a billionaire's son. She was supposed to solidify my mother's place in high society. Instead, she woke up to the sound of heavy diesel engines rumbling outside her bedroom window. The estate my parents lived in was located in a gated community in Mercer Island. It was a quiet, highly exclusive neighborhood. The silence was shattered by the mechanical whine of a hydraulic winch. A heavy-duty flatbed tow truck reversed up the long, circular cobblestone driveway. The amber lights on the roof of the truck flashed brightly, reflecting off the dark windows of the mansion. Leaving the diesel engine idling, the operator shifted the truck into park and climbed out of the cab. He then walked around to the back of the flatbed to unspool a thick steel cable. He walked directly toward the pristine, custom white Tesla Model X parked near the front door. The car did not even have permanent license plates yet. It still had the temporary dealer tags. The operator attached the heavy steel hooks to the front axle of the vehicle. He did not care that it was a luxury car. He did not care about the custom pearl paint. He hit the lever on the control box. The winch whined loudly. The steel cable snapped taut. The front tires of the Tesla scraped violently against the cobblestone as the heavy vehicle was dragged forcefully up the steel ramp of the flatbed truck. The noise was deafening in the quiet morning air. The front door of the mansion swung open. Pippa ran out onto the front porch. She was wearing silk pajamas. Her hair was a tangled mess. Her makeup from the ruined rehearsal dinner the night before was smeared completely across her face. She looked manic. She ran barefoot down the stone steps. She waved her arms frantically at the tow truck operator. "Stop!" Pippa screamed. Her voice cracked. "What are you doing? Put my car down. You are scratching the paint. Put it down right now." The tow truck operator did not look at her. He continued operating the winch. He guided the Tesla until it was secured flat on the bed of the truck. He picked up a set of heavy chains and began strapping the wheels down to the steel deck. Pippa ran right up to him. She grabbed his heavy canvas jacket. "Did you hear me? I said put my car down. I will call the police. I will have you arrested for grand theft auto." The operator turned around. He looked at her. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his front pocket. He handed it to her. "I am not stealing the car, lady," the operator said in a gruff voice. "The federal government is repossessing it. Read the warrant. The asset was purchased with stolen funds obtained through interstate wire fraud. It is federal property now. Step away from my truck." Pippa looked down at the paper. Her hands shook uncontrollably. The red federal stamp mirrored the exact stamp she saw on the projector screen the night before. She dropped the paper on the cobblestone. She backed away. She turned around to run back inside the house to wake up Holden, but she did not make it to the front door. 3 unmarked black sport utility vehicles sped through the open gates of the estate. They bypassed the tow truck. They swerved onto the manicured front lawn, tearing deep, muddy trenches into the expensive imported grass. The vehicles slammed on their brakes, stopping inches from the front porch. The doors flew open simultaneously. 10 federal agents wearing dark tactical gear and heavy ballistic vests stepped out into the freezing morning air. The bold yellow letters, FBI, were printed across their chests. They did not walk slowly. They moved with absolute, calculated precision. The lead agent walked directly past Pippa. He did not acknowledge her existence. He carried a heavy steel battering ram. Holden threw open the front door. He was wearing a silk bathrobe. He looked exhausted. He had dark circles under his eyes. He heard the commotion outside. He stepped out onto the porch to see what was happening. He stopped dead in his tracks. He stared at the 10 federal agents standing on his lawn. He stared at the tow truck hauling away his daughter's wedding gift. The lead agent stepped up onto the porch. He looked Holden dead in the eye. "Holden Vance?" the agent asked. His voice was a loud, commanding bark. "Yes," Holden stammered. He raised his hands slightly. "Listen, officer. There has been a terrible misunderstanding. I have an attorney. I just need to make a phone call to Silas and—" "Holden Vance, you are under arrest for federal wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and money laundering," the agent interrupted. He grabbed Holden's right arm. He twisted it forcefully behind his back. Holden cried out in pain. He stumbled forward. The agent pushed him against the brick pillar of the front porch. "Hey, stop! You cannot treat him like that!" Althea screamed. She ran out of the front door. She was wearing a matching silk robe. She lunged at the federal agent currently putting steel handcuffs on her husband's wrists. Two other agents immediately intercepted her. They grabbed her arms. They physically restrained her. "Let me go!" Althea shrieked. She kicked wildly at the agents. "Do you know who we are? We are friends with the mayor. We are friends with the Kensingtons. You are going to lose your jobs for this. I will sue this entire department into the ground." The lead agent finished tightening the handcuffs around Holden's wrists. He turned around to face Althea. He was completely unfazed by her threats. "Althea Vance, you are also under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and possession of stolen federal assets," the agent stated calmly. The two agents restraining Althea immediately spun her around. They pulled her arms behind her back. They clamped a pair of heavy steel handcuffs onto her wrists. The cold metal snapped shut with a sharp, unforgiving click. Althea stopped kicking. The reality of the situation finally breached her arrogance. She looked at the steel cuffs binding her hands. She looked at the flashing lights of the unmarked vehicles. She looked across the street and saw three different neighbors standing on their front porches, holding their cell phones up, recording the entire arrest. The high society facade was completely dead. The illusion was over. "No," Althea whimpered. Her knees buckled. The agents had to hold her up by her armpits to keep her from collapsing onto the porch. "No, please. We have a wedding today. My daughter is getting married today. You cannot do this. You have the right to remain silent." The agent began reciting the Miranda warning loudly. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you." Refusing to let them change clothes, the agents dragged Holden and Althea down the stone steps and marched them across the ruined front lawn in their silk pajamas and bare feet. Holden was roughly shoved into the first SUV, while Althea was pushed into the second before the heavy doors slammed shut. Pippa stood alone on the driveway. She watched the tow truck drive away with her car. She watched the federal agents drive away with her parents. The entire street was dead silent. The bank accounts were frozen. The house was a crime scene. The billionaire fiancé was gone. I received a text message from Silas at exactly 6:15 a.m. It contained 3 words. "Targets acquired. Checkmate." I turned off my phone. I went back to sleep. 3 days passed. The local Seattle news cycle relentlessly covered the arrest. A prominent socialite family dragged out of their Mercer Island estate in handcuffs on the morning of an elite billionaire wedding was the perfect headline. The journalists dug into the public court filings. They exposed the $2 million in commercial debt. They exposed the forged federal documents. They exposed the stolen gold. I stayed in my hotel room. My physical wounds from the endometriosis surgery were healing nicely. Without the daily stress of dealing with my mother's psychological warfare, my body recovered faster. On Tuesday afternoon, the hotel room phone rang. I picked up the receiver. "Miss Vance, there is a young woman in the lobby," the concierge said. His tone sounded slightly uncomfortable. "She does not have a room key. She is asking to speak with you. She says she is your sister." I walked over to the window. I looked down at the street below. "Send her up," I said. I unlocked the hotel door. I left it open slightly. I went back to the small kitchenette and poured myself a cup of black coffee. 2 minutes later, the heavy wooden door pushed open. Pippa walked into the room. I almost did not recognize her. The flawless, pristine influencer was gone. Pippa looked absolutely destroyed. She was wearing dirty sweatpants and an oversized hoodie. Her hair was greasy and matted. She had dark, heavy bags under her eyes. She looked like she had not slept in 3 days. She looked homeless. She stood in the entryway. She looked around the luxurious hotel suite. She looked at me standing calmly by the counter, holding a cup of coffee. They froze everything, Pippa said. Her voice was a dry croak. The feds froze my personal checking account. They froze my credit cards. They said because I co-signed the financing application for the Tesla using stolen funds, I am an accessory to the wire fraud. I have exactly $14 in my pocket. Preston blocked my number. His security guards will not let me near the Kensington estate. I have nowhere to go. I took a sip of my coffee. That sounds like a legal problem, Pippa. You should speak to a public defender. Pippa took a step forward. Her hands shook. Maeve, please. You have to tell the FBI to drop the charges against me. You have to tell them I did not know the money was stolen. I am 26 years old. I cannot go to federal prison. I will not survive in there. You have to help me. Why would I help you? I asked quietly. You stood in my apartment and mocked my surgery. You told me you needed my money because I was barren and broken. You gladly spent the money stolen from my unborn children. You made your choice. Now you get to live with the consequences. Pippa began to cry. It was not her usual fake, manipulative crying. It was the desperate, ugly sobbing of a cornered animal. I know, Pippa choked out. I know I was awful to you. I know Mom and Dad were awful to you. But you do not understand why. You do not understand why Mom hated you so much. I understand perfectly, I replied, setting the coffee cup down on the granite counter. I flooded her bridal studio 15 years ago. I ruined her business. I bankrupted the family. She made sure I never forgot it for a single day of my life. She used it to justify treating me like an ATM. Pippa wiped her nose with the back of her sleeve. She reached into the front pocket of her dirty hoodie. She pulled out a small, worn, leather-bound book. It was a diary. You did not ruin her business, Pippa said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I froze. I stared at the leather book in her hand. What are you talking about? Pippa walked slowly toward the kitchen island. She placed the diary on the counter and slid it across the marble surface toward me. I kept everything in here, Pippa said, pointing at the book with a trembling finger. Everything from when I was a kid. You need to read the entry from October 12th, the day after the studio flooded. I did not touch the book immediately. I looked at her eyes. She was terrified. She was handing over the only piece of leverage she had left in the world. I picked up the diary. The leather was cracked and old. I opened the pages. I flipped past the childish handwriting and the drawings. I found the date, October 12th, 15 years ago. I started reading. The handwriting was messy, written by an 11-year-old girl, but the words were crystal clear. I am so scared. The studio is gone. All the dresses are ruined. I snuck in through the back door after Maeve locked up. I wanted to play with the shiny fabrics. I went upstairs to the dyeing room. I wanted to pretend I was mixing potions in the big sink. I turned the water on. I put the stopper in. Then I heard a noise outside and I got scared. I ran away. I forgot to turn the water off. I left my favorite pink butterfly hair clip stuck in the drain. It is all my fault. I stopped reading. The air in the hotel room vanished. My lungs stopped working. I looked up at Pippa. You? I whispered. My voice cracked. You flooded the studio? Pippa nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. I snuck back in. I played in the sink. I left the water running. I destroyed the dresses. I grabbed the edge of the granite counter. My knuckles turned white. A violent, suffocating wave of anger hit me so hard my vision blurred. I spent 15 years of my life believing I was a monster. I worked 80-hour weeks. I gave up my youth. I handed over $40,000 of my own hard-earned money to pay off the legal debts from that flood. I accepted my mother's daily emotional abuse because I thought I deserved it. I was the last one to lock up, I said, struggling to form the words. Mom found the water in the morning. She screamed at me. She told the police I did it. If you left your hair clip in the sink, how did she not know it was you? Pippa looked down at her dirty shoes. She took a ragged breath. She did know, Pippa said softly. The silence in the room was absolute. What? I asked. Pippa looked back up at me. Her eyes were wide and filled with shame. Mom was the first one to arrive at the studio the next morning. She found the water. She went upstairs to the dyeing room. She found the sink overflowing. And she found my pink butterfly hair clip wedged perfectly inside the drain, blocking the water. Pippa took a step closer, desperate to get the words out. I was hiding in the hallway. I followed her to the studio because I was scared. I watched her find the clip. I heard her start crying. She knew exactly what happened. She knew I did it. My heart pounded a relentless, furious rhythm against my ribs. And then what did she do? She reached into the water, Pippa sobbed. She pulled my hair clip out of the drain. She wiped it off. She put it in her pocket. She threw it in the dumpster outside. And then she called the police. She told them you were the last person in the building. She told them you were careless and forgot to turn the faucet off. She framed you. The floor beneath my feet felt like it was dropping away. Why? I demanded, my voice rising into a shout. Why would she do that to her own daughter? Because I was her golden child, Pippa cried, stepping back defensively. I was winning the beauty pageants. I was getting the modeling contracts. I was supposed to be perfect. If the police knew an 11-year-old deliberately trespassed and caused $100,000 in damages, I would have a juvenile record. The insurance companies would have sued her for negligence for leaving me unsupervised. She could not handle the scandal. She could not let my perfect record get ruined. Pippa wiped her eyes. You were just the awkward older sister. You already had a mild concussion from a car accident a few weeks earlier. Mom knew you were confused. She knew she could gaslight you into believing you made a mistake. She threw you under the bus to protect my pageant career. And it worked. You took the blame. You paid the debts. You saved us. I stared at her. The sheer calculated evil of that decision was unfathomable. My mother did not just favor my sister. She actively, deliberately assassinated my character to protect Pippa. She watched me torture myself with guilt for a decade and a half. She gladly took my money to pay off the debts caused by her favorite child. She weaponized a complete lie to enslave me. And when the debts were paid, she decided she was entitled to my grandfather's inheritance too. She justified stealing my gold by using the very lie she invented. I am so sorry, Maeve, Pippa pleaded. She held her hands out toward me. I was just a kid. I was too scared to tell the truth. And Mom forced me to keep the secret. She told me if I ever told you, she would disown me. I carried this guilt for 15 years. I am telling you now. I am giving you the proof. Please, you have to call the FBI. You have to tell them I am innocent in the wire fraud. Please, forgive me. I looked at the diary resting on the granite counter. I expected to feel devastated. I expected the pain in my abdomen to flare up. I expected to collapse onto the floor and cry for the lost years of my life. But I did not. I felt a sudden, profound shift in the atmosphere of the room. The invisible boulder that sat on my chest for 15 years, crushing my lungs and dictates every single decision I made, suddenly crumbled into dust and blew away. I was not a monster. I was not careless. I did not ruin my family. I was completely, fundamentally innocent. The relief was physical. It rushed through my veins like ice water. The toxic programming Althea installed in my brain was permanently deleted. The guilt vanished. The fear vanished. I was entirely free. I picked up the diary. I closed the leather cover. I looked at Pippa. She was shivering, waiting for me to walk around the counter and hug her. She was waiting for the sisterly forgiveness she assumed she was entitled to. I walked around the kitchen island. I stopped right in front of her. I did not raise my hands. I did not offer a hug. My eyes were completely devoid of warmth, sympathy, or mercy. You did not come here today because you felt guilty, I said. My voice was calm, steady, and mechanical. Pippa blinked in confusion. What? No, Maeve, I swear. You came here because your bank accounts are frozen and Preston dumped you, I interrupted coldly. You kept this secret for 15 years while you watched me work 80 hours a week to pay off your mistakes. You watched Mom verbally abuse me every single day. You gladly wore the designer clothes bought with my sweat. You proudly drove the Tesla bought with my stolen inheritance. You did not care about the truth until the FBI showed up at your door. Pippa's face crumpled. Maeve, please. I am your sister. No, you are not, I replied. You are an accessory to federal wire fraud. And you are a coward. I stepped past her. I walked over to the heavy wooden door of the hotel room. I grabbed the brass handle. I pulled the door wide open. I stood in the doorway and pointed down the long, carpeted hallway. Get out, I commanded. Pippa stared at me in shock. You are not going to call Silas? You are not going to help me? I am taking this diary straight to the federal prosecutor, I said. I am going to add it to the evidence file. It establishes a clear, documented 15-year pattern of fraud, manipulation, and financial abuse orchestrated by our mother. It will guarantee she gets the maximum sentence in federal prison. Pippa backed away from me. You cannot do that. She is our mother. She threw my pink butterfly hair clip in a dumpster, I said, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. She chose you. Now, you get to deal with the consequences together. I stepped closer, backing her toward the open door. Have a nice life in federal court, Pippa. I hope the white Tesla was worth it. I shoved her out into the hallway. She stumbled backward onto the carpet. Before she could say another word, before she could scream or beg or cry, I slammed the heavy wooden door shut. The deadbolt clicked into place with a loud, final, echoing crack. The sound of the lock engaging was the sound of absolute liberation. I walked back into the hotel suite. I picked up my cup of black coffee. It was still warm. I took a long, slow sip. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window. I looked out over the Seattle skyline. The sun was finally breaking through the heavy gray clouds, casting a bright golden light across the city glass. I smiled. 6 months later, the crisp spring air swept across the expansive outdoor terrace of a newly constructed commercial high-rise in downtown Seattle. I stood near the edge of the stone parapet, wearing heavy work boots, dark jeans, and a thick canvas jacket. I held a steaming cup of coffee in my right hand. I looked out over the massive landscaping project my firm was currently installing. 24 workers were planting mature Japanese maple trees into customized concrete planters. The irrigation systems were running perfectly. The blueprints I drafted were coming to life exactly as I envisioned them. My landscaping architecture firm just secured the largest commercial contract in our history. Without the constant financial drain of my parents' debts pulling me under, my business exploded. My profit margins tripled. My body healed too. The brutal endometriosis surgery was a complete success. The chronic pain that plagued me for years was gone. The surgical scars on my abdomen faded into thin, silver lines. I no longer looked at them with shame. I looked at them as proof of my survival. I pulled my cell phone from my pocket. I had a new email from Silas. I opened the message and read the final legal update. The federal court in Seattle did not show any leniency. The evidence was simply too overwhelming. The high-definition video of the break-in, the forged federal interstate transfer documents, and the detailed financial audit of the stolen educational bonds painted a picture of calculated, predatory fraud. Holden Vance pleaded guilty to federal wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and money laundering. Because of the high dollar amount stolen from a registered federal trust, the judge sentenced him to 84 months in a federal penitentiary. He would not see the outside of a cell for 7 years. Althea Vance fought the charges. She hired a cheap public defender and tried to convince a jury that she was the victim of a vindictive, unstable daughter. She tried to use my medical history against me in court. It backfired spectacularly. When Silas introduced Pippa's childhood diary into evidence, proving the 15-year history of targeted psychological abuse and financial manipulation, the jury looked at my mother with absolute disgust. Althea was found guilty on all counts of conspiracy and fraud. The judge sentenced her to 96 months in federal prison. 8 years. She was currently serving her time in a minimum security facility in California. She spent her days working in the prison laundry room, folding cheap cotton uniforms instead of designing custom silk wedding gowns. And Pippa. The federal prosecutors offered Pippa a deal. Because she was a co-signer on the fraudulent auto loan, she was facing accessory charges. She avoided prison time by agreeing to testify against our parents and surrendering all of her remaining assets to the court. Pippa was stripped of everything. The white Tesla was auctioned off by the government to restitute the stolen trust funds. Her bank accounts were seized. Preston Kensington permanently blocked her on all platforms and quickly married the daughter of a tech billionaire 3 months later. Pippa moved into a tiny, cramped studio apartment in a bad neighborhood. She got a job working the front desk at a budget gym, checking in members for minimum wage. Her influencer lifestyle was dead and buried. As for the money, the federal government successfully clawed back the entire $135,000 from the estate broker. As the transaction was deemed illegal, the funds were deposited back into my grandfather's registered trust. The $50,000 educational bond was also completely restored through asset forfeiture from my parents' estate before their home was foreclosed upon by the bank. My financial future was entirely secure. I closed the email from Silas. I locked my phone and slipped it back into my jacket pocket. I took another sip of my coffee. I looked up at the bright blue sky. For 15 years, my mother told me that I was a burden. She told me that I destroyed the family. She convinced me that I owed her a debt I could never repay. She used my physical illness and my broken body as a justification to steal the last remaining pieces of my security. She thought I would stay quiet. She thought I was too weak, too broken, and too conditioned by her abuse to ever fight back. She was wrong. They stole $225,000 from me, thinking I was barren and defenseless. They thought they were taking my future. But in the end, they triggered the exact legal trap that permanently removed them from my life. They performed the ultimate excision surgery. They removed the real tumor from my existence, themselves. I turned away from the edge of the terrace. I walked back toward the construction crew. I had a business to run. I had a life to build. And for the first time in 15 years, the foundation was finally clean. Thank you so much for watching this story to the very end. The psychological manipulation of a golden child dynamic can absolutely destroy a family from the inside out. My mother chose to ruin one daughter's life to protect the image of another, and it ended up costing all of them their freedom. But I want to know what you think about the final decision I made. When Pippa showed up at my hotel room, crying, homeless, and handing over the diary that finally proved my innocence, she was desperate for my help to avoid federal charges. She was only 11 years old when she made the mistake that flooded the studio, and our mother forced her to keep the secret. I am the storyteller here. We have arrived at the end of Maeve's journey, and what a profound awakening it is. We see that the true inheritance Maeve recovered wasn't just the gold coins or the trust fund, it was her own truth. The ultimate twist about the childhood hair clip reminds us that toxic family systems will gladly rewrite history to keep their scapegoat in chains. By closing the door on Pippa and letting the law handle her parents, Maeve didn't act out of cruelty. She acted out of rational self-preservation. She finally excised the emotional tumor that was draining her life, choosing a quiet path of self-care and professional success. As we sit with this resolution, let us ponder this final thought. When the people who are supposed to love us unconditionally choose to build their happiness on our silent suffering, is walking away completely and letting them face the consequences of their actions the ultimate act of self-love and healing? Thank you for being part of our storytelling family today. Relationships are complicated, and sometimes the hardest project we will ever design is the boundary around our own hearts. If Maeve's journey touched your soul, reminded you of your own resilience, or helped you untie some of the silent knots in your own life, please subscribe to our channel and follow our community. Together, we will continue to look at these deep, challenging life lessons with a calm mind, a rational perspective, and an empathetic heart. Subscribe now, and let us walk the path of understanding and healing together. Until next time, take care of your peace.